The first 6 chapters give us information about the jiva or the soul. The last 6 chapters give us information about prakriti, the material nature. The middle 6 chapters are considered to be more confidential knowledge because they give us knowledge of Krishna. And chapter 9 is considered to be most confidential knowledge because in that Krishna reveals the secret of accessing him easily and directly. So chapter 9 is titled A Pure Devotional Service, and that's where Krishna talks about unadulterated, unmitigated Shuddha Bhakti. So in the 7th chapter, the flow so far has been that in the first 3 verses, Krishna basically tells Arjun how can knowledge about him be accessed, and he makes this point that he's we can sit over here. You can sit here if you want. He makes Prabhupada makes the point how through the process of hearing from authorized sources, Krishna is easily accessible. He also talks about the rarity of one who is looking to get knowledge about Krishna. He said, Bhavanam Jamanamante Jnanamanam Prapadyante. That, after many births, very few people. No, here he says, Shahasranam. He talks about it 3 times. So here he says, Manushanam Sahasreshu Kaschyati Siddhya. And we had discussed how out of millions and millions of souls, a very few souls will actually take to the process of bhakti, and Krishna expresses his affection and actually his gratitude also. That Krishna, out of humility, sees that that how fortunate he is that these souls are establishing a relationship to him. Then in the next set from 4 to 12, the 9 verses, Krishna talks about his energies. So this is Krishna manifesting more through the agency of his external energy and his marginal energy. So we discussed how everything in this material world boils down to 23 elements. We talked about the 5 gross elements, how the 5 gross elements have the 5 result in the 5 sense objects. Earth results in fragrance. Fragrance requires nose. So then there are the sense objects. So that's 15. And then there are 5 working senses. So that's 20. Then there's 3 subtle: earth, mind, intelligence, false ego. So there are the 23 elements. And Krishna says how he is the essence of all the 23 elements. And not only that, he says he is also the source of the jivas. So the question that obviously comes up in Arjun's mind is that if Krishna is everywhere and if service to him is so relishable, then why don't more people take to the process of devotion? Some might say that Krishna is difficult to access, and that's why they don't take to devotion. Krishna disambiguates that, Haribol, how are you? So that's why Krishna disambiguates that notion that he's actually available everywhere. And some might say that there is a lack of knowledge and understanding, Hare Krishna. There's a lack of knowledge and understanding, and Krishna is openly giving knowledge about himself. So then in the set of verses that we are doing, Krishna discusses about why people don't take to spirituality. And he talks about 4 kinds of people who don't take to him, Hare Krishna, who don't take to him. And he said, Namam dushkritano mura prapadyante naradama maya partha jnana asuram bhav ashrita. So 4 kinds of people will not take to him. Namam dushkritino. So Prabhupada in the purport writes that kirtano is pious activities. Dushkritino are those who are doing pious activities for motivated gains. So it's not the dushkritino are people who are committing outright sinful activities. So they're not people who are going and like killing people or robbing people. So they're kirtanos, but they're dushkirtanos because their pious activities are not geared towards making spiritual advancements. And we also discussed that how each of these 4 persons, he is, and sometimes when these things are presented, we always think that the 4 people are sitting somewhere around me. So this person is maybe is Naradhama, this person is Maya Partha Jnana. We may be to some extent right, but also all of these 4 people are sitting within us also. And that's the main lesson that we have to get from Bhagavad Gita, that when Krishna talks about a lot of purification that needs to be done, he's not really giving it to us for judging others. Unless we have that, if you're a guru, if you're a spiritual master, then yes, you do that, but you do that for the purpose that how can I help the person. But it's not given to us to say that, okay, there sits a Mura, there sits a Naradhama, there sits a Maya Partha Jnana. It's there to see what are these tendencies within me that are preventing me from taking to Krishna. So like he says, Mura are those who are people who are mindlessly pursuing materialistic goals. So we may not be mindlessly pursuing materialistic goals, but definitely there is a sliver of that in us. We all at some point or the other, and maybe perhaps still, have strong materialistic desires. Maya Partha Jnana. Maya Partha Jnana is one whose intelligence is overcome with illusion, Maya Partha Jnana. And that's something that I can 100% relate to myself. That initially when I took to Krishna consciousness, I had such a strong propensity to speculate on everything. I would read a verse from Prabhupada's Gita, I would go on the internet and read another verse from somebody else, I would compare the two, I would try and look at the Sanskrit translation and say that this should not be like this should not be like that, or I would say that Prabhupada actually wanted to say something different than what he says. And then it got to a point that at one point my Guru Maharaj, he strictly forbid me from reading any other books. He said, don't read any books other than Srila Prabhupada books. And then he says, he said no internet browsing. So in fact there's I forget who's the guru. At the time of initiation you take 4 vows, right? No meat eating, etc. So there's a guru who actually makes the disciple takes 5 vows. 5th vow is no browsing on the internet. Because there is so much stuff on the internet that it can bewilder anybody, and a lot of the stuff is presented in a very authoritative way, and it's poison is bad, but worse than poison is poison that is in milk, because you don't get a sense that it's poison. There are websites that have pictures of Prabhupada, they start with Nama Om Vishnu Padaya, all the mantras and all that, and then when you start reading them a little bit more, then you see a lot of subtle discrepancies, and they're so subtle that you don't even realize it. And then as you meditate more upon it, then it basically affects you in a way that you don't even see it affecting you. So so after Krishna speaks about these 4 people who do not surrender, then Arjun may feel demoralized, because Arjun, being a very conscientious student, will obviously see all these four tendencies within him. He will say, yes, I'm materialistic, I need a king, I need a kingdom, I have pursued knowledge for the sake of knowledge, etc. So then Krishna, he also speaks now about the four kinds of people who surrender to him, the four kinds of pious people who will surrender unto him. And again, this is a famous verse, Chaturvidha bhajante mam, jana sukritanu arjuna, artho jigyaso artharti, jnani cha bharatarshava. So he says that there are four kinds of people. So artho is one who is, so the interesting thing that you will see over here, that it's the same four people. The four people in the previous verses are also mentioned in this verse. So it's interesting to say that Krishna speaks about the same four people, but the only difference is where do they go, where do they take shelter. So he does not say that one without material desires can surrender. He says artho. Artho is one who is looking for material benefits. Then jigyasur, inquisitive. Artharti. Artho is one who is materially distressed. Artharti is one who is looking for material benefits. And Jnani is one in knowledge. So you see that there is a correspondence. Jnani in the previous one, Asurik Bhav, Jnani is Maya Partha Jnana. In the previous verse he said Maya Partha Jnana. And here he says Jnani. Both of them are persons who are seeking knowledge. But one takes shelter of Krishna, the other takes shelter of something else. Similarly, Artharti is a person who is looking for material gains. The first person in the previous verse was Muda. So Muda, Prabhupada explained, Muda is a person who works very hard for very little benefits. That's the nature of the material world. You work very hard, you get a little bit out of it. So same, we have Artharti and we have Muda. Jigyasur. Jigyasur is one who is inquisitive. And this corresponds to Naradhama. So Naradhama is atheist. So Prabhupada in the purport of chapter 4 verse 10, he explains a little bit about why does a person become atheist. That one of the main reasons a person becomes atheist is because when they try to know about God, they get so many conflicting views and opinions that finally they say forget about this. That if there is God, there should be one authoritative source, one authoritative knowledge. Somebody says you're God, somebody says nature is God, somebody says God is light in the sky, somebody says God is in another dimension, and everybody says it with full faith and rigor, and the person says that this is too much for me to handle. So his pursuit of inquisitiveness ends up in atheism if it is not properly satisfied. It's something we can all relate to because we all went through this journey. So we were fortunate that we were able to come to a place where by the mercy of Mahaprabhu and Prabhupada, we are getting answers to a question authoritatively. But we all experience this frustration where we had this question about who is God? Is Krishna God? Is Vishnu God? Is Ganesh God? Why are there so many gods? And and even before you get your arms around it, then there are other religions, Christianity, Judaism, so many other versions of religion. It's easy to bewilder somebody, right? So when the inquisitiveness is not properly addressed, it results in atheism. And Artho is distressed, and Prabhupada explains that. So, what do you think is the primary cause of distress? I just want to see how. So, Prabhupada has, of course, his scriptural perspective on it, but I just want to hear from an experiential perspective. What is the primary cause of distress in this world or in our lives? Desires, expectations, because expectations, attachments, and they are all within what framework?
Material.
More specific, more where do we have expectations? Relationships. So relationships are actually the primary cause of distress. That there was this study that was done, I think it was published in the Time magazine. I know it was quoted, it was maybe about 7-8 years ago, maybe 10 years, about the happiest people in the world. And they were actually in Bangladesh, which is the poorest country in the world. And a lot of the parameters that they had used to define happiness were answered in a way that seemed counterintuitive. That the things like do you feel satisfied with the kind of work that you're doing? Do you feel enthused to start your day? Those kind. They were more subtle kind of questions. And then one of the conclusions on that is, it's not what you have, but it's what you make out of it that makes the difference. And they were talking also about how people as they get more opulent, they tend to segregate themselves. They'll live separately. I remember once I was driving through Great Falls, and the person who was driving me was a real estate agent. I mean, I wasn't looking to buy a house, but he was a devotee friend. He was a real estate agent, and he was telling me that a lot of these houses, they have 7-8 bedrooms, and they have maybe 1 or 2 people who live maybe 3 or 4 months, 6 months. They have multiple houses. So he said the occupancy on it comes to maybe 1 person a year, half person per year, and big houses, well manicured lawns, etc. So it's not, it's after some point you reach the point of diminishing returns, that you can get so much to make you happy, but then after that the benefits of material advancement starts becoming counterproductive. So when Krishna talks about artho, so the people who are distressed are basically the kind of people who finally then submit to impersonalism, because they have experienced so much of angst in relationships, and then somebody goes and tells them that you have an eternal relationship with God is a person, and then say, "Na Baba, we have too much of problems with people around me. I don't want to have an eternal problem with an eternal person over here." So then they deny the personal existence of God. So we are okay with God as an energy. You can't have a relationship with energy. You can experience it, you can appreciate it, but you can't have a relationship with it. So they tend to become impersonalists. So essentially the difference between the last 4 and this 4 is, Prabhupada writes in the purport, is that they get the mercy of a devotee. That one who is, let's assume, embarking on the path of inquisitiveness may embark on so many paths that may lead them to so many destinations, but if by some good fortune they make contact with a devotee, then the inquisitiveness gets directed towards Krishna. And Krishna, of course, when you're interacting with Krishna, then there are so many questions that get answered, and there are so many questions that are also placed. So Prabhupada would say that you surrender to Krishna. You don't surrender your intelligence to Krishna. You surrender to Krishna with your intelligence. So the bhakti movement is not about Krishna is God, period. And if you dare ask how is Krishna God, that means you're blaspheming. Or if you dare ask that how does Krishna have Radharani over here and Rukmani over there, that means your spiritual life is ended. Prabhupada would encourage those kinds of questions, and the Vaishnavacharyas encourage those questions. But it just but what difference does it make is that how do you ask those questions and where do you go with them? Is it for the purpose of strengthening your understanding and relationship, or is it for something else? Okay. Any other questions? Any questions on this? Comments?
Talking about how people become atheists because they get bewildered and they get confused and there is a lot of information. Especially in Indian culture, you hear about some people having some gurus, some people following some babas. I was just, and this came to me this occurred to me last time also that Ramakrishna Paramahans had a famous quote, Joto Pot Toto Mot, Joto Mot Toto Pot. That you can have a different opinion and they can all be different paths.
Right.
So isn't it about making sure you stick to a path?
Right.
Just whatever path you choose, whatever philosophy you choose, making sure you stick to it.
Good. So good. Prabhupada actually speaks extensively about Jatomat Tatopat, but I just want to hear what others think about it. It's a very good point of discussion. So you understood what Malika is saying, right? Jatomat Tatopat is so mat is your opinion. Whatever you think, that's the path for you. And like you're saying, Ramakrishna Paramahans said, then you stay true to that path. That is a short way of making spiritual advancements. So what are your thoughts, comments about it?
That is the way, but we should always open to take. It's like a filter. We always have attitude to if something we are getting in that path. For example, like we are on a path, and after a long time we know that this is not the path. I'm in the wrong path. So we should be ready to
take corrective action. Okay, good. Thank you. Any other thoughts?
At some point you start to question how bona fide the path is, and it's very experiential, very subjective. So it's not very dogmatic which path to take, but it's very experiential. And at some point, start asking whether this is the right path or not. You can gauge based on if you feel different, if you feel more materially detached.
Good point.
Question of what you should question your progress, see how good your progress is.
And just don't.
Path is helping you progress.
Yeah, just don't blindly follow your own wanderings.
You should introspect.
Good. Thank you.
If the mat is about thinking religion by that, then obviously different religions have very different paths and very different goals too.
Right.
I mean, we tend to think that all religions they take us to the same place. Some religions, like Islam, the concept of heaven and hell. Hinduism, I think we more worry about seeking truth and not worry about going to heaven and hell, but finally mingling with the God himself. So, and of course, the paths are very different. We tend to be, not Armenian, no, we don't tend to be vegetarians and all that. Islam, Christianity, of course, very different. So, I think not only the paths are different, but the goals are also different. And sometimes the differences in paths also contribute to frictions, different followers of different paths.
Right.
So, not sure that everything is the same.
Yeah. Thank you. So you're saying that Jatomat Pato Tatopat does not mean that they will all lead to the same goal. Different paths may actually lead to completely different destinations. Okay, good, thank you. Any other thoughts, comments?
Prabhu, there are so many paths in which, for example, in Hinduism also, some people worship only Ganesh or some people worship only Sai Baba. So though they are, or Shankar Bhagwan, so though they are demigods, but still they are devotees of Krishna. So whichever way you worship, but still you are worshipping in one way or other Krishna's devotees. So God as Krishna gives us faith in that path also. Like some people who are following different paths towards, like even Jesus or even Muslims follow, but still they are devotees of Krishna. So still they get some success, and maybe in this life or that other life, next life they progress towards the higher path. That's what I think.
Good, thank you. Pyali?
Yeah, I think at the core though, I mean, and religion has been misconstrued in different ways, but at the core, I think there is a fundamentally there are some, I think, intrinsic philosophies that are consistent across religion. Like be good to your neighbor, be a good person, be giving,
don't
faith
lie.
in some supreme power or figure or whatever. So I think that's very common thread that runs across all religions, right? So the paths might be different, the process might be different, but I think some of the intrinsic philosophies are probably consistent.
My Guru Maharaj ji used to often say that scientists are very close to God. Who discover new things, often for the welfare, and then it's theories used. The theories absolutely new, innovations that are then used various ways. They're actually very close to God.
And they also get to appreciate the infinite complexity of nature. Like Einstein would say that that the more that we know, the more we understand how less we know. So I think that's another way. I was once sitting in the metro, and there was this person with a T-shirt. So he had a picture of Einstein, and he had this thing written that most of the stuff attributed to me I never said. So I don't know if Einstein actually said this or not, but I heard this quite good.
I want to understand who's behind the complexity that we see out there when we study science.
Yes, yeah. He was definitely very theistic. You had a point, Pyali?
Yeah, I did. So even in the Bhagavad Gita, we see that there are many paths that are listed out.
Yeah.
So different people with different kind of mentalities or different kind of mentalities, but maybe have the same aspiration in the end to understand God or reach God. For them also, just because so many people are different, you have different paths written out. So different people with different opinion can pick different paths.
Different paths.
That can make you reach the same goal.
So good points. Prabhupada, I guess he spoke a lot about this particular aspect, and I think he covered most of the points that were discussed over here. One point that he did speak strongly about that wasn't spoken here was Prabhupada would give the example of you're a patient, you go to a doctor and you say I'm sick, and the doctor says do whatever you want to do, and it's not very likely that you will get cured. And and he would give this example that the patient would say that is it okay if I eat half a kilo of ghee, and actually the patient is suffering from stomach problem, and the doctor says okay, that's what you want to do, just go ahead and do it, and the patient will end up dead. So another analogy he would say is that if you're going from New York to Bombay, and you start off in some other direction, it's unlikely you'll end up in New York. So you can say, this is my mat, that I'll go this way, and then you travel, and then you may end up at some other place, but you're definitely not going to end up in your in your desired goal. So a lot of things that are sent by sages like Paramahansa, it's important to take them in context. That so Paramahansa came at a time when there was when there was a lot of rejection of Indians' philosophy and spiritual values. So he came at the so-called golden period of Renaissance, or intellectual Renaissance, in India. So this is again one of the things where the person is basically, if you're dealing with a child that is very disturbed, then he's saying I want to eat 5 sweets. You say, okay, eat 1 sweet or 2 sweets. Don't eat 5 sweets. So he came at a time when people were rejecting, and this was largely because of the British influence, also because the British influence that was coming actually through Indians, and his motivation at the time was to somehow or the else get the people back into the general philosophical fold of Indian culture. He himself did not practice whimsically. He was a strict practitioner, and later on he became his experiences became very esoteric, and at that point, more than him, his disciples publicized it. He tried to keep it confidential, but his mood generally was, as was of a lot of people during that time, was to revive, to stop Indians from feeling ashamed of following Indian religion. That was the predominant mood there. So when you bake that off with some of the points that were made, like Pyali was making Somu was making that, but there are actually many paths. There are paths within Hinduism, worship of Lord Shiva, worship of Lord Ganesh. There are paths across the religion. So does that mean that either you follow Vaishnavism to Krishna or you go to hell, right? So that means there is no choice. So the answer is, of course not. There is a choice, but all those paths are bona fide paths. So they are not like whimsically picking up any path. It's like, when you put on the GPS, at least this Waze thing, it will give you 2 or 3 alternatives. Right, all of them will take you where you want to do. Some will take you 10 minutes more. Some will make you pay a toll. So they give you different alternatives. You pick that path up, and then you follow that path. You'll go to the destination. So the path has been crafted out with some thought behind it. This is source. This is destination. This will take you where it is. So that's how there's different options in Bhagavad Gita. They'll take from point A to point B. And there are different options across different religions, and they're bona fide paths. So you have that option of taking. So to that extent, there is mat, that based on your own propensity, somebody will take to karma, somebody will take to gyan, somebody will take to astang, and somebody will take to bhakti. Somebody will take to Hinduism, somebody will take to Christianity or Islam. The reason Krishna makes himself available through so many different paths is because of us, because we have so many different propensities. But one thing that he discourages right from the beginning is being whimsical about it, is developing this notion that this is how I think God is, so this is how I think God will be attained. Yeah, and there are so many ways that these thoughts are wrapped into. That I have a personal relationship with Krishna. Krishna is in my heart. Or I have a personal relationship with God. I don't need anybody else to tell me how to be with my God. I'm against organized religion. So many ways that people wrap it into. But ultimately, people don't want to surrender to why should I think like the other person is thinking, right? But ultimately what they do is they surrender to their own intelligence. They still surrender, but instead of surrendering to the intelligence of the authorities, they surrender to their own intelligence, which is a lot more fallible, because it's the product of the material nature. The example is given that if somebody is diseased, it is difficult for the person to cure themselves, because they are already afflicted by the disease. And one might say, this is my disease, it is affecting my body. I know the most about this disease, I am affected the most about it, so I shall cure myself. But the reality is that even when doctors they become sick, they go to other doctors to get the cure, just because they lack that objectivity when it comes to those kinds of evaluation. So while there are multiple paths, but the recommendation is pick a path that is a bona fide path, and then follow it. Don't spin up a path for yourself, because that will definitely take you somewhere where you don't want to go. Yeah, helps. Any other questions, comments? Okay.
One day, can you go, not during the series, but you go for interfaith conferences, right? So it'll be interesting to see, to get your insight on those conferences at some point in the future.
Yeah, definitely. But they're very collegial. I think the focus is more on the similarities. So typically in the interfaiths, there is a topic that is picked up. Like I remember I once went to a Vaishnava Christian dialogue, and the topic that was picked up was chanting. And I was thinking that chanting is so specific to Gaudiya Vaishnavism, and then I was surprised that the Christian the Rosary, and there is Francis of Assisi, who basically was kind of like Haridas Thakur. He would chant all 24 hours a day, and his life was very similar. He would, like Haridas Thakur, would go to an isolated place. He would go to a cave and chant. He did exactly the same thing. And when he was asked that what is the key that by which you can chant the Lord's name over and over again, he said exactly the same thing Haridas Thakur. He said, I think myself lower than everybody else. Tranadapi Sunichena Tarurava Savishnena Ma. So there's a lot of similarity there. My general takeaway is that there's a lot of philosophical resonance. Difference comes in practices, how we actually go about doing it. Some areas there are of course distinct philosophical differences also, like the notion of animals. Like we believe everybody has spirit. Christians don't believe that they have spirits. Animals don't. Only humans have spirits. Animals don't have spirits. That's how they feel. There is no sin in the whole notion of reincarnation. That is conspicuously, understated. Even though, according to Christianity, some form of reincarnation in some cases is there. According to some experts in Christianity, it gets qualified a lot, but mainstream Christianity, they don't believe. So when you die, you go to a purgatory, which is kind of like a holding place, and then at some point of time, people will either go up or down, and that's whatever. So those are the areas where there are distinct philosophical differences. But I think the one thing that I noticed, and after that I'll move on, is that where there are more similarities is where spirituality intersects with the material world. Like no religion will say it's good to steal. Like no religion will say that kill your neighbor. So where there is the material manifestation of spirituality, there is a huge amount of resonance over there. We can talk more about that. So Krishna, after speaking about these 4 kinds of people, he says, of these, the one who is in full knowledge, this is verse 17, of these, the one who is in full knowledge and who is always engaged in pure devotional service is the best. For I am very dear to him and he is dear to me. So, of the 4 kinds of people that Krishna speaks, so they are known as Mishrit Bhaktas, because the devotion is mixed with desires. Mishra means mixed. So the devotion is mixed with desires, whether it is for material gains, whether it is for relief from distress. But of these 4, 3 are Sakam and 1 is Nishkam. So sakam means their devotion is mixed with kam, that they want some fulfillment. They want fulfillment of some material desires. But the person who is pursuing Krishna for knowledge is nishkam. So the person is not looking for anything. The person is not looking for wealth, not looking for fame, not looking for relief from distress, but person is just looking to know more about Krishna. And it's a little, so one of the person is jigyasu, the person who is inquisitive, and Prabhupada makes a distinction that a jigyasur is basically looking to inquire to gain intellectual capital. So such a person may inquire about Krishna and gets some understanding, may inquire about some other aspect of some other religion, some other spirituality. So what they are actually looking for not is specifically Krishna, they are looking for knowledge. That what is this all about? That why is Krishna blue in color? Why does a god have a peacock feather on his head? And more I'm being a little superfluous about it. More deeper questions also, like how does he create? How does he interact, etc. But what they're looking for is some intellectual capital. The Jnani is basically nishkam. The Jnani is looking to find out more about what is Krishna all about. How can I establish a better relationship with Krishna? So that's the category that, again, by Prabhupada's mercy, most of us tend to fall in. That so we are reading Bhagavad Gita, which is a book of knowledge. We read other scriptures also. We listen to lectures and attend lectures. But the real motivation in our heart is, how can this help us be more Krishna conscious? How can this help us drive away the doubts that we have that are impediments in us establishing a relationship? And that's why Krishna is establishing, he is declaring his fondness for such a person. So he is saying that, who is in full knowledge of me and always engaged in pure devotional service. So for Krishna, time moves differently for us and for Krishna. So and because he is able to see across time, so I don't know if something I am doing. So when a person is a Mishrit Bhakta, he cannot do pure devotional service, right? Pure devotional service is a symptom of a Keval Bhakti, of a Bhakti that is not mixed with anything. But the point that Krishna makes over here, that when a person pursues this path, he will eventually engage in pure devotional service. It's a matter of time. Maybe a matter of a few seconds, or maybe a matter of few lifetimes, or maybe a matter of a few million lifetimes. But from Krishna's perspective, time is like, it's like because time doesn't really exist in the spiritual world. So that's why he's already declaring such persons, people who pursue him with knowledge. He is already declaring them as engaged in pure devotional service. Because when you understand, and this was one of Prabhupada's oft-repeated statements, when you understand how great Krishna is, you will automatically serve him. So when we pursue the path of knowledge, then we come to understand the greatness of Krishna, and everything else automatically follows there.
The knowledge is niskam karma, but how we apply that knowledge, maybe I'm getting the knowledge to maybe I understood all of them, but if I am using them in a different path as opposed to, isn't it something like bad, or is it not niskam karma?
Then it is not. So if somebody is basically, so let's assume, I study a little bit of Bhagavad Gita, then I start giving, saptahas, Bhagavad saptahas, and I start getting money out of it. So then it's not really the path of Gyan then, right? maybe one of the other three paths. Maybe Artho, maybe Artharthi, like. But the way that Krishna talks about this category of people, Gyan, they are basically pursuing Krishna to understand more about him.
Then where to make the balance? For example, somebody had the knowledge but not the complete one, and he tried to apply it in the wrong way because he don't know the right way. So how to balance that? I mean, at a point you need to use that whatever you gain, and gaining the knowledge and applying it. So what is the point to balance?
So there is no really point to balance, but it's more of the balance of intentions, so to speak, right? That if a person is sincerely following that knowledge, where will that knowledge take the person? So it will take the person to take shelter of a bona fide spiritual master. It will take the person to a point where the person is motivated to follow the instructions of the Guru, Sadhu and Shastra. So the execution at all points may be faulty, and that is that is perfectly fine. So one point we were discussing last week, that aspiring for perfection is impersonalism, right? So the execution may be faulty at all points, as long as the intentions are properly directed. The intention will purify the execution. Yeah, that helps.
How do you know that you gained the knowledge, fully gained knowledge, or partially gained knowledge? Knowledge is a ocean, right? So where is the point the human can understand, oh, I gained the knowledge?
It's a good question. So
there is no scale.
There is no scale. So there is a point where the practice based on the knowledge attracts the mercy of Krishna to the extent that he gives whatever the knowledge is remaining. Right. So this point Krishna makes in the 10th chapter, in the Chaturshloki, which I consider to be the key verses. And then he says that one who becomes more and more sincere in my devotion, he says, I make up for whatever knowledge that they do not have. Right. So on our own, we can never get complete knowledge. Our senses are limited, and our intelligence is also limited. So our perfection is basically to have enough knowledge to make the distinction between what needs to be done, what we should not do, and then aspire to do what needs to be done. Right. So even the injunction is not even that once you know what you have to do, you do it perfectly. The intention is that the instruction is that you aspire to do it to the best of your ability. So in the 4th chapter, Krishna talks about this interplay between Gyan, Karma and Vigyan, and several verses, but I'll give a very brief summary. So let's assume you study the Bhagavad Gita, you get some understanding out of that. Let's assume that based on that you say that it'll be good for me to chant a few rounds every day, right? So you start chanting, and you chant whatever way that you do. Then based on that chanting, you feel there is some purification in your heart, and then you read a little bit more verses, or maybe you read the same verses but with a little deeper understanding. Now based on the deeper understanding, then you maybe chant, or maybe you start going to you start offering your food, or you go to the temple, and that will give you deeper realizations, and then you go back and read, and then you get further understanding. So this is the cycle of Gyan, Karma and Vigyan. Gyan is knowledge, Karma is acting on that knowledge, Vigyan is experiencing that. So this is the cycle that basically, if you are following a bona fide path, it will deepen. Knowledge, practice, realizations. More knowledge, more practice, deeper realization. Till the point where Krishna says that whatever now you have, I can supplement it. So teshan evam kamparta aham ajnana janta. That I am the one who will dispel any remaining ignorance that you have. Gyan deepena bharta. He says, I light this knowledge of this deepena, this lamp of knowledge in your heart. Right? Anything else? Questions, comments? Maybe
I'm just being silly, but over here it says in the 16th verse that there are 4 kind of people who will try to approach me, right? One who is distressed, one who is trying to but one of them who is trying to understand more and seek the absolute truth.
Mm-hmm.
And then in the next verse it says the person who has knowledge of me in full.
Mm-hmm.
So isn't that the 5th category?
It is the fifth category in the sense that it is the 4th category after maybe a million lifetimes, or maybe after a few years. So that's the point I was making, that once a person embarks on the path of approaching Krishna for knowledge, it's a matter of time before Krishna will give the person complete knowledge. And Krishna does not he does not dwell too much on the time. Time for us is really big thing, but for him, and we'll see that in other parts of the scriptures also, where Krishna does not, he talks about from this stage to that stage, which may take us a very, very long time, but he just puts them side by side as if they're almost adjacent to one another. So, and that's why he says that such a person is doing pure devotional service, right? He says such a person is dear to me. But the point that he says the person is dear to me, that is not predicated on full knowledge. Mm-hmm. Even the person who is aspiring for getting knowledge, that person right away becomes dear to Krishna, because ultimately where is that person going? Right. So we are talking about destinations. So you have started down on that path. It's just a matter of time before you will end up in that destination. So Krishna is seeing that he's coming, and so already that person is in Krishna's heart. Okay. The next verse. All these devotees are undoubtedly magnanimous souls, but he who is situated in my knowledge in knowledge of me, I consider to be just like my own self. Being engaged in my transcendental service, he is sure to attain me, the highest and the most perfect goal. Yeah. So at this point, people who are in the other 3 categories might be like, what's the point? That Krishna is just speaking about the jnani. So, I'm the artho, artharthi, jigyasur. So Krishna is casting a wider net. And he says all these souls, so all the 4 categories, so they're undoubtedly magnanimous souls. So what does magnanimous mean? Magnanimous is one who is big-hearted, one who is generous. So it's very interesting to see Krishna's humility over here. So Krishna is saying that, so magnanimous you would say to whom? That I come to you and I say, Prabhu, give me $5. And you say, okay, take $10. I say, he's a magnanimous person. He gave me more than I asked for. Krishna is calling us magnanimous for taking to him. So that is Krishna's humility. That even though he has nothing to gain and we have everything to gain, but the humility is not based on the equation of gain or loss, it's based on the equation of love. Prabhupada would say that Krishna misses us infinitely more than we miss Krishna. That every moment that we are not with Krishna, Krishna is thinking about us. That the soul is over there and suffering. And this is my dear friend. This is the soul that I used to play with in Vrindavan. This is the soul that I had so much fun with bathing in Yamuna. And now he is suffering through this cycle of birth and death. So that's why Krishna is actually thanking. He's thanking them. He's saying that, artho jigyasur artharthi, all these souls are magnanimous souls, because they are doing me the favor of trying to re-establish the relationship with me. And then again he shows his special affection for the Gyanis, and he says that but one who is situated in knowledge I consider just like my own self. And there's a little you have a question?
Yeah, I was just going to say that coincidentally just today I was hearing a lecture very recently given by Rampath Maharaj about Krishna's devotion to devotees. Usually we talk about devotion to him, and this is like what you're talking about, so I'll share it on the WhatsApp group. It's a really, really sweet lecture, very nice.
Thank you. So he says that one is situated in knowledge I consider to be just like my own self. So this does not really mean that Krishna is saying that such a person will become God or will become merge into me, but a person in knowledge gets connected with Krishna's Chit Shakti. So Krishna has Sat, Chit and Anand. He has three energies. So Chit is his knowing potency. Chit is the potency by which Krishna knows everything about everything, including himself. And as we progress on this knowledge, on this path of Gyan, we get connected with Krishna in the Chit potency. So, one of the siddhis of more advanced devotees is the fact that they know so much. And Prabhupada would surprise people that he knew so much about so many things, given the fact that he came to America without any prior knowledge, but he just seems to know about so many things. And of course the king of all knowledge is knowing Krishna. So then Krishna wants to disambiguate any notion that a person might say that when he said this person is just like myself, that this person is merging into me. So the very next line he says that being engaged in my transcendental service. So service means two people. There has to be a person who renders service, there has to be a person who receives service. So he wants to make clear that this person is just like myself because he understands me very well. But then he clarifies that the greatness of this person is because he is rendering transcendental service and he will ultimately attain me. So he is again giving by this time for us it's a foregone conclusion that for a person who is embarking on this path will attain Krishna, and Krishna is reaffirming that point. Next verse. After many births and deaths, he who is actually situated in knowledge surrenders unto me, knowing me to be the cause of all causes and all that is. Such a great soul is very rare. So second time in this chapter where Krishna is pointing to the rarity of devotional service, that after many births and deaths. So in the first verse he talked about of the many souls a very few will take to spirituality. Now he talks about on the time scale, that of the many births that the souls take, one may take to Krishna consciousness. So if you combine the two, it's like of millions of souls, a few souls after millions of births take to Krishna consciousness. And the point that he makes here is not to discourage but to encourage those who have taken to spirituality. He's also setting because in the later part of the chapter he speaks more about people who do not take to him. So he's also setting the stage so that Arjun does not think that after hearing this everybody should become spiritual. So sometimes we have this notion that we get discouraged by other people's way of life. So we are following a certain way of life, we look around, we see that 20 million people around us are following a different way of life, and then we say that I know 20 people who are following this way of life, I know 20 million people who are following a different way of life, majority rules. Or they may get discouraged that, I'm so much in the niche that there may be something wrong in the niche that I am. So Krishna also wants to encourage Arjuna and us that the rarity of devotional service is just because after many births and very few souls get inspired to take to pure devotional service. So one must not get discouraged when they see 20 million people are not able to take to Krishna consciousness. They should get inspired by the 20 people who have actually taken to it. Those whose intelligence has been stolen by material desires surrender unto demigods and follow the general rules and regulations of worship according to their own nature. So Krishna had set the context in the previous verse that very few people will actually take to surrendering to Krishna specifically. Now he talks about people who do not. So these are people who surrender, but they do not surrender to Krishna. Right? So he talked about 4 people who do not surrender, 4 people who surrender. Now we'll talk about 2 kinds of people who surrender but do not surrender to Krishna. So these are people who surrender to devas, and Krishna generally has. So this part of Bhagavad Gita, different verses, it disturbs a lot of people, especially from Indian background, because Krishna generally has a very condescending attitude towards devas. And Prabhupada, of course, he speaks even more strongly than Krishna in his purports. So people, some people do get disturbed. At one point I used to have a mailing list in which I would send a verse of Bhagavad Gita every day, and not the entire purport, but with a summary of the purport. And I know that when these verses were sent out, I would definitely get a lot of angry responses. That people, how dare you disrespect Lord Shiva, how dare you disrespect Lord Ganesh, and some people would send me quotes, especially people who follow Durga Devi. There are various quotes in which they quote how Lord Vishnu was standing with folded hands in front of Durga Devi, and how Lord Vishnu ran in fear from the battlefield and Durga Devi came and helped there. So again, this is something that, 2 things here, that this is something that only Krishna does. So it's kind of interesting that you will never see in Devi Puran or Shiv Puran them denying Krishna. So Lord Shiva will never say that those whose intelligence has been stolen worship Lord Krishna. Right? In fact, he says in Gita Mahatmya, he says the opposite. Ekam Shastram Devaki Putra Gitam, Ekam Devo Devaki Putra Eva. So even to his followers, he is saying that Krishna is God. And you see the same in a lot of other scriptures that are not directly aligned to Vaishnavism. And one reason why Krishna says it is because it is what it is. So it's not that. So devas are devotees of Krishna. So it's not that Krishna is envious to them. It's not that he's inimical to them, and that's why he's saying that Indra. If you worship that Indra, then So it's not that he has that sense of antipathy towards the devas, but he wants to make us as spiritual seekers clearly understand what the difference is. So when he says that kama is there, so in kama is that people who surrender to demigods are ones who are very strongly desiring some material benediction. So most of the worship to the devas is centered around this give and take. That you do this and you will get this. That you worship Lord Ganesh and Vigna Vinasham. and obstacles will go away. That at another point in purport, Krishna talks about the benefits of worshipping various devas. That if you're looking for a good progeny, then I forget what the various what the various demigods were, but Prabhupada talks about how people worship various demigods for specific reasons. The demigods, and the reason they worship is because the demigods fulfill those desires. That somebody wants fame, they worship Lord Surya. Surya Dev gives them fame. Somebody wants a good wife, they worship Lord Shiva. Lord Shiva gives them that benediction there. But the reason Krishna says that Kama is that these benedictions, because they are material by nature, they will only last as long as your material life lasts. So if you get wealth, you may enjoy it while you're alive, but it will go away when you die. And no demigod will give you the benediction that you have wealth in all your lives. So it's basically you have to again go up the food chain again do the worship, again do the get the benediction. So that's why Krishna says that those whose intelligence have been stolen by material desires. But here also he mentions that they follow particular rules and regulations. So generally you will see that Krishna, even when he's obviously not authorizing worship of Deva, but at the same point he's saying that they follow the authorized way of worshipping Devas. So by authorized means as per the scriptures. That if somebody is worshipping Lord Shiv, then they worship as the scriptures direct them to worship Lord Shiv. I am in everyone's heart as the super soul. As soon as one desires to worship some demigod, I make his faith steady so that he can devote himself to that particular deity. So here again Krishna is going one step deeper and he's saying that not only does he allow worship of devas, but he is the one who actually strengthens the worship. He says that I am in everyone's heart as super soul. And when somebody see, because the component of faith can only come from Krishna. It may manifest in different ways, but Krishna is the only one that can create faith, because the intrinsic quality of faith is the faith between the Jiva and Krishna. So Krishna owns the copyright to that. He has filed a patent. He owns the copyright to faith. Now we may use that for something else, and Krishna says that he allows and encourages that. The big question over here is why. So in the previous verse he said, he's obviously being disparaging, saying people with polluted intelligence, but he's saying that I actually grow their faith. So the point about faith is clear, that he grows the faith because he owns faith. The faith that is there in us, he owns it, and because he owns it, it is for him to do as he pleases. And in this case what he does is that he allows us to repose that faith in the particular demigod that we would wish to worship. But the question is, why does he do that if he is not happy about it? What are your thoughts about it? Because he wants our desires to be fulfilled? Okay.
Because that's a propensity for now, or that's our background. So if we grew up worshipping Lord Ganesha, then he will actually make you a stronger devotee. Eventually, like you mentioned, you are worshipping Krishna, even if you're worshipping Ganesha. But then for now, this is our sensibility. This is what we've grown up. So you are worshipping him indirectly, but you have to strengthen your
devotion muscles.
You have to go deeper into devotion.
Good point. Any other thoughts? something more basic, more fundamental. Why does Krishna do this? Yeah?
So it's like if I'm worshipping a demigod who is worshipping Krishna, I am also in the same path, in a similar path. I think that's what it is. It's
That's
pretty much
not
resonance of
that's not considered to be demigod worship. So if you're worshipping, if you're worshipping Lord Shiva as a devotee of Krishna, that's not demigod worship, right? Because you're worshipping Krishna's devotee. If you're worshipping Lord Shiva as the Supreme Personality of Godhead, that is demigod worship.
Basically, you're worshipping Shiva with half knowledge at some point, and that knowledge, when it deepens, when you get to the full knowledge, like you said, the time you get to full knowledge, that's when you realize that you're worshipping a devotee of Krishna.
Yeah, that's a good point.
So it's the transition.
Yeah, Krishna respects our free will.
Free will. So that's the basic reason that out of our free will, when we do something, even though it may not be, and there are obviously in this particular case, the points that you made are all valid points, that there are secondary benefits, that we are exercising our devotion muscles, we are submitting. That's why the demigods make themselves accessible through the scriptures. Everything the demigods do is by Krishna's desire. It's not Lord Shiva goes on his own thing and says that I'll write Shiv Puran and I'll set up a competing stream of devotees to you. So they're doing it because Krishna wants them to do it, and these are the reasons Krishna wants them to do it. That one develops faith in the scriptures. So even I was listening to this interesting discussion. It may sound a little bizarre, but this person was saying that if you see a ghost, your faith in Krishna will grow 1,000,000 times, because the ghost is a creature that is not explained by any science, by any of your contemporary understanding. So in your mind you will think there is something beyond all that I see by my empirical senses. There is something beyond what is explained by all the science. So if there is something there, that means what the scriptures that talk about ghost also talk about Krishna. So if this thing that they are saying is right, that thing also has to be right. So your faith will automatically grow, not because the ghost reminds you of Krishna, but the ghost is also spoken of in the scriptures, which also speak about Krishna there. So I think it's not that he was saying that you go out and seek darshan of ghosts, but the point he was trying to make is that that's why the scriptures make so many things accessible to us, because then it promotes this transitivity. The scripture says this, the scripture says that, the scriptures say that, the scriptures talk about Krishna, so they are all true. So in that notion, yes, the worship of the demigods will basically help us develop faith in the scriptures. How do we know about Lord Shiva? We know from scriptures only. The same scriptures that talk about Lord Krishna. So that point is valid, but also Krishna is after having openly discouraged us from taking shelter of the devas, he is saying that I will encourage you in your faith, is because he also wants to show that he will always give us our free will. If there is no free will, there is no. So what goes away with free will, or what comes with free will?
Love.
Love comes with free will. If there is no free will, there is no love. If there is free will, there is love. Our relationship with Krishna is that of love. If Krishna takes our free will, the essence of the relationship is expunged. So Krishna might, so Krishna might say that as super soul, I will discourage everybody from doing anything but following Krishna consciousness, and Krishna can do that, right? But then what will he get out of that? He will get jivas who have been forced to love him, and that's an oxymoron. You can't force anybody to love. Yeah. Okay, so we'll stop over here. While the kids are coming up, any closing thoughts or comments?
Vipassana Pondarayan. Like they don't believe in night worship, and they just teach you the technique to concentrate on the breath. Goenka ji was talking about, why do we, what do you think about when you worship a particular god? Say you worship Ganesha or Shiva. So these are the qualities that we know from the scriptures about these demigods. Are very inspiring. So the reason why we worship Shiva, like on Mondays women would fast for a good husband. Shiva was a very good husband. So he has all these qualities.
He's a good husband.
So, yeah.
Parvati, you don't want to upset Parvati Devi, right?
Yeah. So but in many ways there are all these positive qualities that you can think of. So the day you're fasting, you actually think about the positive qualities of a particular demigod, and then you try to imbibe
them. Yes. And that goes to the original point you're making. That is why they are there. Otherwise Krishna would not give us those things. They are there because they are our hooks into the process that hopefully would eventually lead to Krishna consciousness there. But what he discourages one who is taken to Krishna consciousness to basically then get that he calls deviation. That one who has surrendered to Krishna then starts getting deviated and saying that but I need a good progeny, so let me worship Uma Devi or something like that. That he discourages. So that's like taking a step back. Yeah? Okay.
So basically, like worshipping gods means indirectly worshipping Krishna also.
Yeah, so Krishna in the next verse he says that they indirectly worship me, but they worship me in a wrong way. So why are they still worshipping Krishna? Because the faith is coming from Krishna and the demigods are coming from Krishna. So that's why they're still worshipping Krishna, but they're doing it in a wrong way because they are not understanding the position of the demigods with respect to Krishna. So if somebody worships Lord Shiva as the greatest Vaishnav, right, they're worshipping in the right way. But if somebody worships Krishna as the Supreme Personality of Godhead, they're worshipping in the wrong way because Lord Shiva himself does not accept that position. So, if I come to you and I say that you are the chairman of the company where you are maybe you are just working over there, so it does not help me because you're not the chairman, does not even make you happy because you're not the chairman of the company. So the relationship itself is then wrong. That's why Krishna says wrong way. Yeah? Who wants to hold the mic? You? Okay.
Can you share the Kesha Krishna? No.